Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Well, we'll now move towards the world of food writing, and that's why I would request Mr. Pushpesh Pant to please stay back for the next session as well. Well, today more and more people are trying their hand at food writing, even if they are armed with just the recipes they've probably tried at home. So that's why this session is relevant. Why does so much garbage appear under the guise of food writing? Pretty straight to the point. Let's hear what our panelists have to say on this. May I invite on stage Ms. Priya Kapoor and Ms. Sabita Radhakrishnan. Ms. Priya Kapoor is a publisher and an editor. She began her career in journalism with the Indian Express. She worked at the academic publisher in London for 2 years before joining Rowley Books 10 years ago. In her time at Rowley Books, she has commissioned and edited both mass market successes such as Dongri to Dubai by Hussain Zaidi, as well as award-winning books such as Taj Mahal Foxtrot by Naresh Fernandez. Ms. Sabita Radhakrishnan is a playwright, textile expert, and author. Her books, Kids Kitchen, Recipes for Young Chefs, which covers easy cooking for children from the age of 9 to 15, bagged the Korma Award for Best Family and Children's Cookbook of the Year. Annapurni is a recent book that has been published by Rowley Books in an unusual format, like an old scrapbook which covers traditional food of various Tamil communities. I would now request Mr. Pushpesh Pant to take this session forward from here.
Well, look, I think I must apologize to the audience immediately. I mean, back-to-back 2 sessions with the same person is a bit of a too much for the audience. That's number one. I almost feel like a stepney tire in a car that, you put it on, and fortunately these are the days of tubeless tires, so even a stepney tire with a puncture can take you for 20 to 30 kilometers perhaps. So I shall try my best. I have a problem with the title of this session. It says, why is so much garbage being dished out as food writing? Now I have 2 problems with this. Why single out food writing? And that's what Priya was saying, that maybe we change the title, but it's too late for that. So we shall stay with the title, and I feel strongly about the title. I'm primarily here not because I'm a poet, not because I'm a short story writer, not even I'm a halfway decent essayist or a travel writer. I'm primarily here because I'm a food writer, and there is a conflict of interest which should be made public, full Monty right now. Priya Kapoor is the publisher, and her father, who launched my career in food writing. And they were generous enough, which again needs a public disclosure, that her father, Mr. Pramod Kapoor, one day very nicely told me, I have printed 5 or 6 of your books, you probably have done more. And then he said, I will recommend you to a publisher in England who would probably pay you more. Very few publishers do that. And he passed up the book which finally was published by Phaidon, thanks to his recommendation, which went on to become the New York Times bestseller in a category of sorts in a particular year. And I have laughed my way to the bank and enjoyed myself, and so on and so forth. But it makes me feel a bit of a fake. I mean, am I a writer at all? I have written a Hindi novel which nobody talks about, knows about. I have written a few poems, but they have gone down sunk. They were 2 months back in Gyanoday about a poet friend who died, but nobody remembers them. I have done a lot of travel writing and journalistic writing, Hindi columns, but Hindi is the child of a much lesser god, so nobody knows about that thing either. I'm glad that most people don't remember the grammars I have written for IS coaching. They are again in Hindi and English both, and one of them is in a digital format. So the agency about the digital format was not because of that, but what little knowledge I have of the technology. I'm not like these 2 distinguished gentlemen from engineering colleges, but is all Raddi newspaper which gave me my knowledge about HTML, TML and things of that kind. So we'll leave it at that. But I think the problem is, the basic issue is that how do we accept so much garbage as food before we talk of food writing? And I would also raise the second question, why single out food writing? How do we accept, and why do we accept so much garbage as writing, as fiction, as poetry, and before we worry about food writing at all? And then the third thing which I wanted to do is that she has written a brilliant book, Annapurni, and I had difficulty getting a copy in daily bookshops, but ultimately I did manage to get a copy. What is food writing? Would anybody like to define that? There is some shameless plugging of chefs and hotels which goes by the name of food writing, and good friends specialize about it. They review restaurants. They are food historians. This morning's not this morning's, I think it is yesterday's or this morning's Economic Times Sunday magazine edition is devoted to food, and the title says Meat of the Matter. And I would only recommend the present audience, enough copies are probably lying around here, although this is again a rival newspaper, this is the Indian Express, but I was carrying my copy from the hotel. First 4 pages are devoted to food. Is it food writing? There is a discussion on beef and beef ban, which to my mind is politics. Then there is something about some books from Karaikudi, Nanjakudi and Chettinadu in that, which is plugging of a regional ethnic food. Then there is plugging of a hotel and chefs, and somebody is legitimized as a food writer, and this lady, I might as well name, I'm not a very polite person, the lady Anuti Vishal, who runs food festivals in Delhi, is also a food writer and also curates meals. But I mean, what do we treat as food writing? A sponsored piece which is advertorial, infotainment, we call it food writing. I think you have cricket writing. And you have cricket writing of the variety of Neville Cardus. Younger audience would not probably remember Neville Cardus, but which reaches into the realm of poetry, where cricket writing goes into that. Or you have people like Norman Mailer writing about the heavyweight bouts of this man Muhammad Ali and Sony Liston, which raises it to the level of poetry. You have people writing about football, which is poetry. But then, are we talking of food writing in of that genre here, or are we talking of restaurant reviews, reviews of food writing books and things? I mean, I again must refer to autobiographically this wretched book, which again, thanks, very nice money, very nice reputation. It has 8 pages written by me. Is that food writing? It's a brief telegraphic introduction to Indian food, and the rest of it is a collection of recipes. So are we talking of recipe books as food writing? Are we talking of restaurant reviews as food writing? Are we talking of plugging chefs and hotels and their food festivals as food writing? Certainly not. There is this book written by Pratibha Karan on biryani, and it has a chapter on it called Bihari Biryani. And the Bihari Biryani recipes are contributed by Misa, Mr. Lalu Yadav's daughter. Now, that can be a long philosophical, metaphysical debate, what biryani is, what biryani in pulav are, but nobody has heard of a biryani in Bihar. There can be litti, choka, chuda, dahi, there can be bakuni, there could be satwan, there could even be a Bihari kebab dating back to Shesha Suri. But Bihari biryani, no. So then this book says this recipe was contributed because it was cooked in their house by a Nepali cook. So I mean, which is kind of a fraud in the name of food writing. So I will stop at that, and I think that we should be more worried about garbage being dished out to us in all fields of writing, garbage being dished out to us as food, and before we worry about garbage being dished out as food writing. And I think there are some very nice food writers at the moment. I mean, anything by Vikram Doctor, anytime. Anything by the writer of Annapurni, anytime. Which would give you the joy of enjoying the use of language almost poetically, which would evoke so many things, a time, a place, a mood. That is what food writing is all about. But I think we do make we confuse ourselves by treating the bulk of garbage which is palmed off as food writing, but food writing is not garbage.
I would like to ask you, I mean, would you say that food writing has come into its own recently? Because in the 80s and even the 90s and even now, you know, there is some kind of vapid ignorance in food writing. And people think that just sending recipes to magazines or just listing out recipes, that's what food writing is all about. But the writers don't seem to realize that there is romance about food. You know, there's so much surrounding, and in a country where we've got a rich tapestry of culture, we have craft, we have textiles, it's a pity that we don't go beyond, you know, just documenting mere recipes in food writing. One writer whom I'm very fond of in the Hindu, she's a girl called Sonali Modalali. She writes mainly restaurant reviews, but she makes it so romantic. She describes the ambience, and you feel like going there. You know, she does a little research. But most people do a single window, just an interview with a chef or interview with a cookbook author, and that's it. There's no research done, which is what pains me. You know, there's so much more to food writing. So would you agree with me if I say that in the recent past there has been a turnabout? People are becoming more conscious of writing.
I think you have done me in rather dirtily, because I thought you would answer the question and you have put me a counter question. And I am not so sure whether I like the sound of my voice to the extent that I will launch off on another long personal subjective diatribe on this one. I think what we are witnessing in the past 2 decades or more is the socially arriviste people trying to project themselves as foodies and say that people who have, I think the session preceding this was absolutely brilliant. Not the session preceding this, I'm sorry, the session that preceded our earlier session, where DP made a very interesting point that the middle class in India is multi-layered, and probably there'll be only 2 classes, middle classes, lower to upper middle classes, and the upper classes. I think as you make up your social stratification journey, you acquire things like playing golf, smoking cigars, belonging to a club, wine snobbery, and there is this snobbery that I am a foodie. I could not eat anything when I was a younger kid. Let's forget about that. I came from a lower middle class background. Meat was taboo at home and I couldn't afford to eat it often enough outside. But now I will talk about morals, I will talk about cheeses, pastramis and things of that kind. So I think it is a vicarious projection of a life not lived, which food writing and talking about food gives you. So I think food writing has become popular, good, bad and the ugly, because it allows you to talk about things which you have neither eaten nor will ever eat, but you can drop off in your conversation to say, like in this case, in this country, most people, Hindus don't eat beef, presumably, Muslims don't eat pork. And this discussion which my good friend Veer Sanghvi has in Rude Food is full of wine and pork and beef and cheeses and things of that kind, which I think is silly beyond all. And Veer is a nice writer, writes good English. But I think his food writing is a con. It basically is projecting one hotel chain or the other hotel chain and telling he is basically a Gujarati Marwadi vegetarian household. But he would like to tell everybody, look how modern I am, I have become cosmopolitan, I eat everything, and I go to Thailand, I eat this, I go to Italy, I eat this, and he makes the reader feel small. But the reader feels small for a short while. He mugs up that and drops it and peppers his conversation with that, and he makes his listeners feel small. So I think food writing has very little to do with food.
But Mr. Pant, we're also talking about cookbooks here, and in the last few years, the kind of cookbooks like Sabita Ji are regional food, right? So we're also going back to basics and to our roots, and people, their interest in wanting to know much beyond recipes. They want to know about, why is it that we eat like this, or why is it that certain things were eaten at festivals or at occasions. And I'd like to believe that, yes, that is the subject of our next book together. But I'd like to believe that it's not just about this aspirational snobbery. It's also going back to good people, as in good writers like both of you, writing about food in a very different way, where you're not just listing recipes, but also giving stories behind and giving much more to the writer. To the audience.
Here I'd like to say, it's the story behind food that makes this food writing.
Absolutely.
To quote my own personal experiences, how I started writing cookbooks. I wanted to write novels, I'm a playwright, I wanted to do many things. But I fell into food writing by mistake, by a happy mistake.
Very happy.
So I started collecting old recipes because I believe in documentation. And in our country, documentation is rather poor, be it textiles, craft. We're only documenting it now. So I felt that a lot of recipes were being lost to us. So I started with my mother and then collected recipes. She used to send it to me. The recipes were fork marked and curry marked and so bad to look at. But I still couldn't put them into a book because of time constraints. And then when I was assigned this task of writing a cookbook, then the search comes for a good publisher. In fact, the previous session, I wanted to raise the question that there hasn't been anything said about the connect between a publisher and the author. Because for us writers, a publisher is like God. Because, to put it simply, because it feels that all your endeavors as a food writer or as a cookbook writer, over the years, it takes about 1.5 years to write a good book with all the research. And then you're waiting for the verdict. And then you're wondering what is going to happen. Are they going to accept the manuscript or they're not? So when they do it, the fun, the excitement, and the bond that grows between the author and publisher is something, unrivaled. It's not like that in a print media at all. So
no, I would agree with you entirely, and I think I would also agree with what Priya said absolutely entirely. But what I was only objecting to is the title of the topic, dismissing all food writing as garbage. I think the book I have enjoyed working most, again, is a conflict of interest because it was published by you. The book they commissioned was Food Path. It was the dhabas along the Grand Trunk Road. And there was a co-author from Pakistan, Humaira, who traveled from Kabul to Lahore, and from Lahore to the Ganga Sagar was done by me and my son. And I think I have never enjoyed working on a book more because it was traveling along a road which is 2,500 years old, originally commissioned by Ashok, who's not remembered very warmly in these parts because of the Kalinga. But then the great Uttarapath was made by him. Sher Shah Suri was involved. The romance of Rudyard Kipling and the Great Game was there. And I think the research for that book, and again I think the publisher played a role in evolving that book visually. It was treated as a road and there was a strip going under each page, and the photographs were lovingly all curated by them. It was designed and printed very well. The only heartache is that despite 2 editions or 3, it remains out of print most of the time because the book sells very well in Pakistan. It sells very well among NRI audiences, and it is, well, I wish I had researched it even better, nothing like your research, but it has those resonances about history and geography which allows you to enjoy the food as an aside. So it is called a food path. The recipes are there, but the book has much more evocative power than recipes have.
Priya, I've got a question to ask you. Now, as a publisher, how old is Rolly Books?
36. Yes.
Okay, supposing it's 50, 60 years ago, would you have liked a sort of well-researched book along with the recipes, or would you look at recipes per se for a cookbook?
I mean, it's a difficult question because maybe we would have been ahead of our times at that time and would have liked to do it. But, interestingly enough, that during the recession, the 2 kinds of books that kept the print publishing industry alive, especially in the UK and the US, were children's books and cookbooks. And there was a sort of a return to entertaining, cooking at home. Children's books you don't stop buying because that's something that you'll always want to invest in for your children. And Phaidon, who you mentioned earlier, who published the India cookbook, they are known for their really beautiful, highly, their production values are very high, they're expensive art books. And about 10 years ago during the recession, when they realized that these books are not really selling, or they were having a hard time finding a big audience, they started with a cookbook, with a very sort of random selection of an old Italian cookbook. And then since then, every year they choose a country and they produce these beautiful cookbooks which go a little bit beyond the recipes. And it's something that you now look forward to. And it was very interesting that an art book publisher decided to venture into this and become very successful with it. And again, I'd like to believe it's because A, we have those kind of writers today who are willing to go beyond a collection of recipes. And B, I feel like we have an audience who is very interested. If you just look at the kind of regional restaurants that are coming up in Bombay or even a Cafe Lota in Delhi, for example, it's the going back to what you know best and wanting to know a little bit more about it. And as a publisher, you're just a happy medium, connecting the two.
No, I think the Roti have had a niche for cookbooks for all past years.
Yeah.
And I think the Buddhist peace recipes, the Hindu soul recipes, the fast foods of India, Rocky Mohan's the art of Indian cuisine and so on, they all have recipes. The fabulous book which you did, The Maharajas, with which I had nothing to do, fortunately, and I can be very objective about it. And I think it's a brilliant collector's item. It goes into the royalty.
But I think food also travels very well.
It does.
So
it
it's
does.
not just, you're not looking at a limited audience of just your, sort of India, but these books do very well abroad as well, and that helps as finding a larger sort of audience for it. Yes.
And another thing is, I think very few writers check their facts. Even where simple things like recipes, which are sent to journals and newspapers, I used to try them out just for fun, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. They don't. Very few of them work in the sense they have not tried it out. They just get recipes from someone and put it in, which I think is very unfair to the reader. So actually writing a cookbook is not all that easy.
No, it's
because
not.
it takes...
I wish I could make it look very difficult, but I think, I think it would be a very stupid cookbook writer who did not try his or her recipes at home. And I think you are not the only one who's doing it. I think the publishers are so strict. They not only once, the Phaidon wanted it checked thrice, and there were such things, 1 teaspoonful of red chili powder. Is it heaped or is it level? Is it kene or is it paprika? Is it badagi or is it maithani or is it nagori? They wanted specification. Is it semolina fine or rough? And then you cook it twice, thrice, and then you let loose the cannon on the unwary public. That's one. But I would say that I would still insist that food writing certainly is not confined to only a collection of recipes, however well researched. There is a question of search for roots. Like for instance, there is this sambar. Everybody in South would say that is a South Indian dish. Till you come to Tanjore and go to their Lakshmi Mahal library and go to their manuscripts and find out that there was a Maratha Naika ruler called Samboji who tried his Marathi amti with tamarind, and then it became the sambar. Now the moment you put it in public domain, there is exactly like a ton of bricks, all the tamarins will come on your head, that how dare you profane our sacred, and things of that kind. Or the Rasgulla debate, I mean, in which I am very happy, I am on the side of the Odias, that they claimed it, they made it, they exported it. So I don't know what will happen to me in West Bengal, but right now I am safe. So I do think that there is a pride in your heritage, and food is part of that. The food is part of that besides the recipes, ma'am. You have that special vessel in which you prepare rasam, yam, and you have a urudli, and you go down south, you make something in Puta in Kerala. When I say go down south, I mean further down south than Tamil Nadu. And then you have a china chatti on which you make an appam, and then you have a nirappam and things of that kind, or you have an... So I think the utensils in which the food is made, the ingredients which go into it, are parts of the food lore. And food lore is part of the rituals, fairs and festivals, cycle of seasons and so on. So recipes to my mind are just the trigger for doing a food writing. You basically do because you are a glutton, you drool, you want to try out foods of different kind, and that's it.
For instance, we have, in our community, we have something called vadagam. It's a seasoning ball, and it's a very complicated thing to prepare. It's got a whole lot of things like methi, zira, and mustard, onions, garlic, and so on. And it requires at least 4 to 5 sunny days because they are sun-dried. And it's a process of taking these things, it soaks in onion juice, then making them into balls, putting them into the sun, at night again crumbling them, and then doing the whole process. So it takes about 4 or 5 days.
I'm glad you mentioned this because last night when I was eating in Kanika, the Odia specialty restaurant, the Mayfair, they gave me something called bodi chura, and the body would be very close to what you are describing. Okay. So would be the Bengali body, so would be the Suchu body in Kashmir. Right. So it would not be a one-off thing which is exclusive. And if you are a
but
good
you know
food
what this has done? People, when we make them, we keep them for 2-3 years. It doesn't go bad without refrigeration. Now what they do is, I mean, I don't do it anymore. You put 2 balls of vadagam on a plantain leaf, offer plantains and betel nut, and do arti to it, and it faces the sun, put vermilion and turmeric on it, and hope that it doesn't get spoiled. Okay. So these are the things which make it so interesting.
So nice.
The story behind it, you know, and then you come with it. But they are to die for, I can guarantee you. It's worth all the...
Are you carrying some with you?
Pardon?
Are you carrying some vadagas with you?
Well, I wish you had told me. You didn't answer my emails. Otherwise, I would have sent you, I brought you some.
So much about digital world. This is what happens to digital communications.
No, but even what you were talking about, that there are similarities in different cuisines that we find here. That's another book idea in itself.
I know. When we meet, and we normally meet at the Odisha Lit Fest, the book ideas sprout and they grow more than recipes. No, but I think, you know, we are avoiding the fundamental question that when so much garbage is being served as food, can you really have good food writing? You can interview a chef, you can research the story of a food. I mean, like I feel heartbroken that yesterday I asked him that, can you give me, he said, Ghanto kha lijiye. Ghanto nahi to santola kha lijiye. So I said, which one do you think? And I mean, I felt very bad because the dalma we have in Mach Bhat in Gurgaon, which a Odia lady makes from her home, tastes far better than what in a starred hotel is served here. So I think what happens is that we are letting a heritage food die. We are forgetting the taste of what good food, our own food or somebody else's food is. I mean, you have something like sambar with tomatoes. And you go back to literature, you go back to Silapadikaram, you go back to Mani Mekhalai, and you have the description of this lady giving the sambar aroma wafting, or giving some alms to somebody. And that's where the story starts from. So food was an integral part of a culture or a community. Now we have forgotten what the benchmark for that good Indian food was. So tomatoes can go, although they are part of a Portuguese-Colombian exchange.
I have a question for both of you as writers and researchers. How do you go about, where are your sources? What do you look for when you are researching your books? I said, what are your resources? How do you go about your research? Are there that many readily available sources for you to refer to?
No, they are not readily available sources, not in the kind of heritage food I write about. It's a very, very long process.
So is it all based on oral history?
It's
and
based
speaking
on
to
oral.
as many-
Generally what I do is I try to go to the older generation, and some of them very strangely are not willing to divulge the recipes or talk about it. Like my husband's family is they are a family of very good cooks, and they had this remarkable recipe called chupal curry, which was originally a Persian recipe, but it got inculcated into the household. It's about 100 years old, and it's done with skewers, with a piece of meat, and with green chili, with ginger, garlic, and simmered with spices delicately, and then served. It's very good. Chupal curry. Yes. So to get this recipe out, my husband had about 8 aunts, and one by one they died. And finally the last one was left, and we literally kidnapped her, took her home, and made her cough up the recipe. And I had to cook in front of her, gained her approval, and then it went into the book. And her question was, why should you let out family recipes? Why should you put it into the book? That's our recipe. I said, you can't die. You cannot die without giving this recipe. So that's how I got it. Now, to come back to your question, Priya, one has to talk to them, and it's not a question of sitting with them and writing it down. You talk to them, then they open up, then they tell you their family connections, how this came about, how they cooked it, what ingredients went in. Now, I was very interested to hear from this aunt that tomatoes were not used in our cooking. Now, we cannot do without tomatoes. We use them. It came in only 100 years ago, and instead of that, they just put a touch of tamarind, and it makes a lot of difference. And that they used to use mutton with bones for biryani or certain curries, whereas now boneless is the thing. We use it for everything. So small little hints like that which help you write better. But unfortunately, not many writers take this kind of trouble, because they want to finish everything soon and get on to the next. That's the day and age we are in.
I think there is a bit of an addiction once you get into food research. I mean, where you get your sources is very tricky. One way is what she said. The other is if you are not lucky enough to have 8 aunts, you're dying in succession or not, what do? You look for somebody else's aunts, you look for somebody else's wives, not literally. You look for somebody else's wife, you look for somebody else's sister, daughter, whatever it is, and you chase them. And what she says that somebody might be able to do it for ego, like in Banaras, where you come from. Somebody mentioned a masala sprinkler called Bukano, and said there are 36 ingredients which go into it. I went to and nobody could tell me. So somebody, Hemant Sharma ji in the ITV told me, you go to Shyam Sundar Das ji, who works in gold and brocade, he will be able to tell you, he's an old timer. He said, I can't tell you, go to my wife. I went to the wife said, no, this masala was given to me by a Vediji. So we finally ended up at the Vediji. Vediji surprisingly said, I know, reeled off 28, 29 spices, the rest I will ask from my wife, because she had brought it from her family. So you follow a trail, and sometimes it is a cold trail, sometimes they are making it up, like the Tunda Kababiya, saying 300 spices in my sprinkler for Galati Kebab, and you go over the pharmacopoeia and the list of spices in Pruti's book, there are not 300 spices there. So obviously there is a bit of an exaggeration, a bit of myth making, a bit of exotica to sell food. But then I think what she's raising a very interesting issue, that is there an authentic recipe, a family recipe, or even a traditional recipe? How do we know that this was eaten in the times of Shah Jahan, or eaten in the time of Mumtaz Mahal?
Well, we have a Shah Jahan's cookbook.
No, we have a Shah Jahan's cookbook, which is a translation of a Nushka Jahangiri by Salma Hussain, or the Emperor's Table. But that is a Persian text being translated into English. Okay. We do not know whether this recipe, and no Indian food is cooked like a recipe, like a scoffers, like mother sauces and so on. So it is a bit like music, that you have the notes, you combine them, and every time a great musician sings a rag or plays it, there is a lot of improvisation. You may belong to a gharana, you may belong to a style or genre of music, or Karnataka or Khayal Gaiki or Dhrupad or whatever it is. But you may be a disciple of a great guru who's a disciple of a great guru, but your rendering of a raga every time is a little different. So, I mean, I remember a phrase from Bade Ghulam Ali Khan Sahab, quoted in Sheila Mathur's cooking music, where she says, Pag, Rag or Rasoi, kabhi kabhi bad jaye. I mean, tying a turban, singing a rag, or cooking a recipe well is a matter of chance, which may or may not work. It's magic. So I do believe that when you are researching, you are also doing it with your eyes open, that this might be a bit of a con job, this might be a bit of a distortion in transmission, lost in translation.
No, I think that happens.
That happens.
It evolves.
Absolutely.
One cannot say with impunity that this is it, this is the original
So what
recipe.
is the ultimate test is the proof of the pudding is the eating. You try it 3 times, you make the recipe 3 times, and you say whether it works or it doesn't.
No, I think it's very important for the audience to know what goes behind writing these cookbooks. It's not as simple as somebody telling you a recipe, you're trying it out and putting it out there, but you're also researching. And you're basically trying to verify and connect the dots in as many ways as you can, whether it's ants or looking up books or going and finding a bed in the night.
What is the shot in the arm is when people call you, they send email and they keep saying, I tried it out and
Okay.
it's come just like
Perfect.
that.
Yeah.
No, that is the biggest reward an author
Absolutely.
can. Then I wanted to ask you another question. Now, a book like Emperor's Table
Right.
that you brought. Now, just tell me, do people buy it for the sake of recipes because the recipes are very complicated to try out, or do they buy it for acquiring a book?
Well, I think a book like that has a little bit of a intrigue value as well. They want to know how people, Mughal emperors ate. What is it that they ate? They may not want to replicate it at home, but it also gives you an idea of what kind of ingredients were around at Shah Jahan's time and for a reason. And then it gives a recipe. So I think it's also a little bit of, I mean, if you're a historian or if you're interested in history, it could be as intriguing to you as somebody who wants to try out the recipes. So I think that is also a shift in the kind of cookbooks that, well, strictly not necessarily cookbooks, but
as
books
selling-
related to food.
as
Yes,
selling
absolutely.
books, say that these sort of books sell better than the actual
I wouldn't say they
books.
sell better, but they do have an audience.
They do.
A good, I mean, a sizable audience for us to want to invest in a, you know, four-color, sort of
exactly.
beautifully produced book. We are translating Shah Jahan's cookbook at the moment and trying very hard to basically adapt these recipes to something that you could cook at home, but it's nearly impossible to do that. But I think it's just very interesting. Yeah, exactly. But I think there's a very well-researched introduction to the book. Again, talking about why is it that they ate certain things as the camp moved, how is it that they were able to integrate the local regional food into that, and what we eat today may be a result of what they picked up along the way. And I think that in itself is quite interesting enough for us to want to publish the book.
I think we have been issued a buzzer round instructions. So last 10 minutes, this is open to the floor now for questions, comments, agreements, disagreements, and things of this kind. It's all yours, folks.
Sir. Sir, here.
Shoot.
So I want to get into travel journalism. Recently I read an article on molecular cooking, but it was sort of dry, I'm sorry to say. So what I wanted to know was that when to be a success in that field, do I have to be a foodie with wanderlust and a poet, to evoke the same kind of emotions with my readers, which resonates with mine?
Taha, you are asking a very interesting question. I mean, there is an old Sanskrit verse which says, Arasakeshu kavitto nivedanam prabhu malika malika malika. To serve something either musical or culinary before somebody who's a boor and has no taste may that not be my misfortune. So if you write something, and even if you are a most talented travel writer or a musician or a painter, you will have, even Picasso had his bad days. So you don't write consistently something which will be evocative and moving. You do pot boiler kind of writing if you are a professional writer or as a travel writer and so on. And if you are writing for travel magazines, you are also having commercial constraints. I mean, I thought eloquently about people who are plugging hotels and chefs, but those are the ones who are buying advertising space in travel magazines and supporting them. So you have to write to an audience, so on, which might not be from the heart. It will not evoke any feeling in anybody else. But as she said, if you take pride in what you are doing, you would still on your bad day make it worth the reader's while to pursue your peace. Like, I mean, people like Vikram Doctor, people like who've been Geeta Doctor, Vikram Doctor, who write with adequate research and feeling for food. You don't have to be a professional foodie, but you have to love food enough, and you should have no taboos. I mean, you say, I'm a vegetarian, but I will go to Chilika, but I will not add crab masala. So then you have wasted your life. I mean, I have nothing against hardcore vegetarians, but then a meat eater who's doing the same and saying, I will never touch anything which is ghas phoos, is again wasting his life. So that's it. So I think if you are aspiring to be a travel writer, you don't aspire to be a travel writer or food writer. You aspire to be a writer. And a writer includes a poet. And then everything else follows.
Thank you, sir.
Does one need to know how to cook to be a food writer? Just does one need to know how to eat?
You are tempting me to answer this with one of those dirty ones again. Do you have to read textbook illustrated to bring about children into this world? Shall we put it politely? I don't think so. Because sensory enjoyment in food and sex, again, we began with that, we'll conclude with that, I think makes it very clear that people react to their biological impulses and the apparatus which the nature has endowed them with, sensory perceptions, excitements, titillations, frustrations, and in between, evanescence enjoyment. So both are transitory pleasures, eating and you know what.
I think you don't have to be a very good cook, but you have to enjoy food. That's very important. One of the two, I think.
Last year, if you remember, you called Rashmi Bansal the Chetan Bhagat of business writing. So what kind of writing would you call the Chetan Bhagat of food writing?
This is getting close for comfort. At times I have done it myself. No, but the point is that is how you get noticed. Mr. Chetan Bhagat would have died unsung as a merchant banker in Hong Kong. He started writing these half-girlfriend stories from the Mukherjee Nagar crowd and became a bestseller. And Rupa, Mr. Mehra, had a bright brainwave to have a disposable book like a toilet paper roll, which you buy up at the airport at 99 rupees and never think twice about it. So I think, much better than that is Dubey's Loser. But the point is that he was not writing in English originally, and the Penguin did not push him like the Rupa's
writing, food writing.
Sir, the problem is that food writing cannot be a separate category for publishers as a business proposition. They will have to balance whether food writing, like this, you see, this again is personal, and it is a little embarrassing because Priya is sitting here, and my food writing career was launched by them, promoted by them. They printed Hindu piece soul recipes, Buddhist piece recipes, fast foods, Avdi kitchen, not to mention the food part. And 3 more food books lined up with them at the moment. But then you see, they are looking at me not as a foodie. They are looking at me as an author who may give us an interesting book which may sell well. And both Priya and her father are foodies. So they probably have a personal interest in food writing, but they also design them well, print them well, get them translated well. They get their books, I have done non-food books for them also. I have done Buddhism for you, and I have done Ajanta and Ellora for you, and I have done, when Lastra Print Imprint was there, Himalaya for them. But that's what I'm saying, that none of those books seem to have registered with the readers, and the food books have all. They are all out of print. So, that is what makes me think that people respond to pornography and food writing in a manner which is personal and different, which allows the publishers to consider your quote-unquote non-serious writing seriously. My total printed books number close to 50. But anybody I offer a poetry will refuse. Anybody I offer, I almost have to go to digital vanity publishing for my second novel. An old friend said, I will print it, before you die, you should have the second novel printed. So he's doing it as a friend. So I think ultimately food writing allows you to find a publisher who may consider a non-food book by you also as a special favor.
Good afternoon, sir.
That's a good
Yes.
So, advancement and changes always mesmerize a person to go further with it. But if this topic is raised over food, if you say you need changes related to food, how would the people, by reading that changes into the books, would attract or disattract people? What would be your opinion?
No, I think you have asked a brilliant question. I don't know whether you are a foodie or not, but you are a very smart young man. Now it's like this. You use a gadget in the kitchen. I'm not getting into microwaves and things of that kind. You use a pressure cooker and you use a mixer grinder. That changes, there's a paradigm shift in kitchen and cooking and household routines. Now even the husband can grind a masala. Even the husband can pressure cook meat. Now, in an earlier session, there was something about slow cooking and rewriting. It was, I think, in the beautiful session in the morning, the Hindi school. I think the joy of cooking was slow cooking, and the taste of food was different if it was slow cooking. If you have had masala ground on a grindstone, the volatility of the essential oils and spices would be registering on your palate and nostrils differently than a fast electrically ground masala or a pressure cooked meat. Nobody self-respecting would do a dam ka murg or dam ki biryani in a pressure cooker. So now the recipe writer or the food writer has to work with the idea that the person may not in a kitchen have a mortar and a pestle, not have a grinding stone, would probably not have a cast iron kadhai or a brass patili to do slow cooking and dam in a chulhe ka angara. Roti would not be cooked on charcoal fire, and you would have to adapt your recipes to that. And you could evoke the magic, as she said, in the research part, introductory part, say that, look, this was done this way, but I'm giving you a recipe which will not be quite there. In the other session, we are discussing music in iPhone or CD or in an orchestra or an acoustically perfect hall. It's the same kind of a comparison. The technological advances in kitchen, maybe refrigeration, maybe pre-packaged, made it easy meals, have changed the recipes. And that change the food writer has to keep in mind. That my food should have the same exciting, enticing qualities of color and aroma without having those back-breaking procedures.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. And ma'am too. This is for sir because I have watched this Raja Rasoi and Kahaniya on Epic channel, and it was really wonderful that you have explained so much about our Odia cuisine over there, which many people didn't know. And you specifically mentioned about the chenna dishes and the sweets, which Odia and Odisha has been means doing for centuries. And after that episode also, there was this widespread debate in social media when we celebrated Rasgulla Divasa this July 30th. Do you feel that some places are not getting the due credit they deserve because the food writing hasn't been done in the past? Even now, there are still, they're finding out the documents which support the claim that Odisha is the birthplace of the Rasgulla.
To cut a long story short, I think for the first part first, the credit for the program Raj Rasoi and Anya Kahaniya should be given to the producer of the program. I am only the anchor. I have done some research and I'm glad you like the program. But the TV program, like all these cinematic programs, are primarily the directors, producers and camera persons and the editors. So I think the credit belongs to them, very little to me. The second part of the question interests me more and engrosses me more. I think one of the major mistakes which Pandit Nehru made in this country was to have the linguistic organization of states. Now what happens is that it gives rise to a parochial pride which leads to these conflicts. And we tend to forget that much before Mr. Nehru, the British had lumped a category of Bengal, Bihar and Odisha as a big tract of territory. And when the partition of Bengal took place, then Hardman was there. But as long as the partition was not there, historically, the Bengalis, the Bhadraloks, the better off people employed Orias to cook in kitchen. And some Bengalis had deep, intense collections, including Netaji Subhash Bose's family with Cuttack and Ravenshaw College. And then these people appropriated things which belonged to where they were staying. And then how could the Orias have this food? All this food really should have come when some K.C. Das or somebody else dropped a sandesh serendipitously and instead of penicillin he discovered Rasgulla. So, I mean that But that is a bit of a con which the Bengalis, the Malayalis and the Maharashtrians, where I carry my surname from, are prone to. That we knew everything, we had everything, we were forward looking, and we merged with when the British came, and the 3 presidency universities in Bombay, Chennai and Kolkata saw to it that further dissemination of historiography and knowledge, not only food, was there. So it is not like that. I recall a very interesting conversation with Lalit Mansingh, the ex-foreign secretary, who said, why don't you write something about Odia cuisine? I said, I would be delighted. But then he said, you must find enough about this. So I said, can you give me a reference of a gentleman or a lady in Odisha who has researched? He drew a blank, which was very sad, because this was a man who was responsible for cultural diplomacy, a man who takes pride in his Odia heritage, but he could not give me 3 names of people who were researching or writing on Odia food. Then we had a program on temple foods, and there were restrictions obviously, that we could not go inside and shoot in the Jagannath temple, but nobody, even the Mahasoopkars, were willing, as she said, to share the knowledge with a person who did not belong to tradition. So it is not a question of food. I mean, I think one of the greater secrets which people should know is the pan was brought from Southeast Asia 2000 years ago to Orissa, and where from it traveled to the rest of the country, the Nagparni. I mean, but that is what Nagvalari, which is what we have forgotten. So it is not whether Orissa has not been given its due because food writers have neglected it. We have generally been politically correct. We don't want to write about things which will arouse, I mean, the beef controversy is just one example.
Hello, sir.
You conclude or I conclude?
Excuse me. Sir, namaste. Sir, my question is that food is going to employ many of the people in India by taking food from one state to another state. And my second question is that how food writing will gonna help in that?
Very brief answers to that. We can perhaps carry this on after when we get out of this room. I think yes, of course, food is going to be employing more people than any other industry. When there is a birth, there is a annaprashan. When there is a death, there is a shraddh, and in between there is a marriage feast, there is a housewarming. So people have to eat to survive. So food will never get out of business, and food business will flourish. It will provide jobs from agricultural fields to processing, to serving, to washing dishes. So obviously this industry is going to be massive. That's one. How from what is good food, how it's going to affect our health is a very complicated, long subject. The lady who's working on this best is Sunita Narayan, who has come out with a rather interesting book called Food First. And then she's having a blog called Good Food. If you follow that, and she's also, we are collaborating on a very interesting program, what young Indians are eating today in different parts of the country. And I will not say states, because I think linguistic states is a very odd category. Where does the fuzzy frontier of Orissa stop and merges into Andhra, or merges into Chhattisgarh, or merges into some other state for that matter? Or for that matter, what happens to Haryana and Delhi and Punjab and Himachal Pradesh and that kind of thing. So what we consider good, what was traditional considered good, what nutritionally is considered good, what our state in life and age says, is a long involved debate in dietetics, nutrition and changing food fads and fashions. So we'll probably carry this on further. Sir, but if you are interested, please blog on to Sunita Narayan's sites, Good Food, and try to get a copy of her book, First Food.
Sir, because
we will have to end the session here. Any more questions, please, you'll have to be taken off the dais. I think it was a pretty interesting session, a lot of interesting points that were raised. But one thing that we all, I think at least all the Odias enjoyed was that like Imtiaz Ali, when Mr. Pushpesh Pant feels that rasagullas originate from Odisha.
What happens to Kolkata is a different thing.
All right, may I now request the editorial director of the New Indian Express, Mr. Prabhu Chawla, to please present mementos to all our panelists here. Even as the Rasagula debate continues.